Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Julie Petty. I work with Seafood Industry Australia, General Manager for Policy and Projects. We've got an exciting agenda lined up for you today, all around our decarbonisation project, which is currently being funded by FRDC, and Robert's very kindly our project manager. And today we've got a jam-packed agenda where we are looking at, so the decarbonisation project has been, as I said, funded by FRDC, and has been a partnership between Seafood Industry Australia and the Blue Economy CRC. What we are going through today is a bit of a deep dive into a couple of things. So one is looking at Yumbah Aquaculture and their journey along their decarbonisation process. And part of that journey has been a process of data collection and analysis with Ben Daly through Carbonhalo, which has been part of this project, looking at, opportunities to have efficiencies or energy saving throughout the Yumbah business. So Ben and Tim are going to sort of tag team throughout today's presentation, talking through, that whole process and looking at the analysis of the business. But before we jump right into that, I wanted to do a quick welcome to countries and thank you all for joining us. So at the moment, I wanted to welcome you all from all the various countries that you might be joining, and pay my respects to elders past and present. We have a long history of Indigenous engagement and involvement in aquaculture and fishing within our industries, and it's wonderful to still have those people still involved in traditional and commercial fishing within our industry as well, to have that knowledge passed down. What we might do, a quick overview of the project. So this fund started last year with funding from FRDC, as I mentioned, but the project is very much looking at a number of different initiatives and use cases of decarbonisation across the entire aquaculture industry. There's a multi-pronged approach where we're funding a number of, small-scale trials across the industry with early mover companies, one of which is Yumbah Aquaculture, so we'll deep dive into that today. And we're also looking at a bit of an analysis across a number of the primary aquaculture sectors, where we've been working with the peak sectors. Yes, so we've been working with a number of the peak bodies for those different sectors, including Joe, who's joined us online from Barramundi, and Nick from Abalone, where we're looking at collecting data from across those sectors, trying to get a good profile of what's happening across those, the needs and challenges that might exist there. What we might do now, I think, so this webinar is part of a series that we will be rolling out. We will be doing a deeper dive across some of those sectors and also across the other early mover projects within this broader piece of work. Tim and Ben, what I might do is quickly throw to you guys to introduce yourselves. So Ben, if you would like to introduce, Ben, did you want to introduce yourself quickly, and then I might jump across to Tim and we'll get into Tim's presentation. So Ben, across to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Julie, and thanks for having me here today, and see the audience here. I know a few of the faces in the crowd, worked with in the past. So I'm one of the founders of Carbonhalo, and I'll talk a bit about what we do when we jump into the presentation. But I did work at Tassal for 14 years as well, and was in the executive team there, overseeing all the sort of manufacturing, the prawn business, supply chain, the cost of the operation in Sydney. So a lot of experience in the sector, enjoying working with the sector. We have got some partnerships running in this decarbonisation with the sector as well. So, and as we go through today, I'm going to jump into my bit and working with Tim. We'll keep this pretty open. So, if you have questions and curiosities around this subject as we go, then by all means, fire away.
Thank you. That's great. All right, Tim, would you like to do a quick introduction, and then we can jump across to you? And were you still happy to share your slides and do the driving, or do you want me to do that?
I'm happy to do the driving, Julie.
All right, cool. Yep, thank you.
Tim Rudge is my name. I recognise some people in the room. Good to see some familiar faces. I now work in the ESG sort of community engagement area of Yumbah. Still involved in operations to a certain degree. I've come out of sort of 20 odd years of abalone operations, building and managing farms, and now have got something to share with you all, on our abalone, the initiatives we're taking with our abalone business to try and reduce our carbon footprint as well as our power bills.
Now, are you comfortable sharing screen?
Yeah, I'll share screen now.
Cool.
We'll get straight into it.
All right. Thank you.
Tim, did you want me to jump in with a little rundown? Or do you want to do yours first?
Look.
Or did you want to introduce yourself as well, Ellen, then?
Yeah, and Ellen, do an intro, Ellen, and just let them know who we are, what we do.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry, guys. So my name is Ellen Duke, and I'm the Commercial Projects Officer for Yumbah Aquaculture. So I've been working with Carbonhalo on this project. So we thought I'd just give you a quick rundown for today before I hand over to Tim. So as Tim mentioned, there's a few familiar faces in the room and probably a few new ones. So a quick breakdown of Yumbah. We're quite a diverse operation. We have multiple sites across multiple states and we farm multiple species. So at the moment, we're farming abalone, oysters and mussels across South Australia, New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania. And our operational aquaculture systems include land-based flow-through, intertidal rack systems and deep water suspended basket and line systems. So as we progress our strategy to be a leading aquaculture company, we do have several goals under our ESG objectives, and Tim will talk to us a little bit more about some of our current initiatives. But we also recognise that as a business, we've got a role to play in the carbon reduction space if we, do want to be a true leader in the shellfish and seafood industry. We've particularly identified that our land-based farms that are pumping water ashore 24/7, 365 days a year are high energy use and therefore have a high footprint. So whilst we have some knowledge of these emission areas within our business and we have initiated some projects to address those areas, because of the complexity of our business, we're faced with some challenges when we're trying to determine our overall carbon baseline. So that's what brought us together with the Blue Economy CRC and kicked off this project to look at what our overall carbon baseline is as an entire company rather than just looking at it in the silos or the sectors. So we identified that we were going to need a fair bit of help in that area, capturing the baseline data. So I've been working with Ben at Carbonhalo to map out our operations and our supply chain, and we're in the process of gathering the data to be analysed. We are very close to completing that data collection stage with just 2 sites finalising their data now. Once that's done, Carbonhalo is going to analyse the data and create a baseline emissions report for us. From there, we're going to use that information to consider what our options and priorities might be to reduce the footprint and measure the change towards a realistic target. So to kind of wrap that all up, we undertook the project with the aim of understanding our baseline carbon emission profile across all sites and species. And we're really excited to identify some options and opportunities for emissions reduction and create an emission reduction roadmap with short, medium and longer term strategies and actions. So with that, I'll hand back over to you, Tim, to talk about some of our current initiatives.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. So this is the abalone farm that I was heavily involved in building and operating it was built in 2000, in 2 stages, 2000, and then we did an extension in 2016. So pump ashore abalone farms are quite unique, and Ellen picked on me a minute ago because of there's sort of the I suppose the standout in terms of their carbon footprint. But I will say purebred abalone, greenlip abalone, is a jewel in the crown of Yumbah's shellfish offering. The oyster people and the mussel people mightn't agree with me, but it comes at a cost. And that cost is a CO2e emission of between 5 and 11 kilos per kilo of product. So one serving of abalone is equivalent to 5 or 10 kilos of CO2e. So we're sitting under beef. Our most efficient farms are down and around about where lamb is, or lamb and prawns. But as you can see in that chart, we do have a high carbon footprint, and that's directly related to the amount of water that we pump across these farms. So if I just flick back to this picture here, the farm sits on the water's edge. This farm has a maximum pumping head of 5 metres above sea level. So on this farm we're pumping about 1,200 litres per second over the farm. So our intake lines, we've got 4 intake lines that sit about 200 metres offshore, and 4 outlet lines. We discharge in the inshore area, and we are sucking water 24/7, 360 days a year. And I think it's about 40 Olympic-sized swimming pools per day in a 24-hour cycle. And we do that to make these guys. So we spawn greenlip abalone. We have a nursery where we take them through their juvenile stage. They come out at about this size, and then they go into these. We've got 400 slab tanks. They're like a cricket pitch, basically, with cascading water, raceway laminar flow moving across them. And these are sort of adolescent abalone, and these are harvest-sized greenlip abalone. So that's what we do. This facility here produces around about 250 tonne per annum. It's the largest single site abalone farming site in the country. As I said, we have a problem with CO2e, and that is because abalone farming, pump ashore abalone farming, is a unique case. Energy accounts for between 10 and 30% of our operational costs per annum. For every 100 tonne grown, the farms pump about 70 megalitres per day. So that's 16 Olympic-sized swimming pools per 100 tonne of output. Energy use is pretty simple. It's flow multiplied by pump head. Pump head comes in 2 forms, static head and dynamic head. Static head we're kind of stuck with. That's how high it is above sea level. Dynamic head is something that we can control to a certain degree. And when just on the static head challenge, for every 1 metre of pump head, it roughly equals 10% energy use. So if we're pumping to 5 metres here, and another farm down the road is pumping to 6, they're spending about 10% more on power, provided the dynamic head is the same, and that's their plumbing. Just to give you a bit of an understanding of the power demand trends that an abalone farm has. On this farm here at Narrawong, where we do have a reasonable sized freezing facility, so that uses a bit of power here, 13%. Odds and ends, 4%. 83% is through 8 pumps. So it's the pumps that burn the power, and lots of it. This is a snapshot of a day. So you can see we've got this is summertime, but even then there's a little bit of a spike, and that could be the freezing works. but it's a very flat demand profile. So it doesn't change much, day or night, 24/7. And the saying here, this is our annual power usage, and you can see the bulge in summer, and that's when we're probably processing more abalone, but definitely pumping more water. But again, it's a very flat profile. It makes us a really, really good customer for a power company, because they can buy, they could forward contract power, knowing that we've got a really stable demand profile. So we traditionally have been a very good customer, and I guess, you know, compared to what you would pay at residential level, we get power at a very competitive price. However,
Tim,
yes,
if you go back to that graph, what
Yep.
happens in the months where there's no green bars? No processing? Or
no, the green. If you can't see that, so
no, it's the key is very
Yeah.
small.
that's the minimum kilowatts, and then the blue is the average kilowatts, and the red is the maximum kilowatts. This was from an energy audit. It actually does just reflect, Julie, if you ignore the colours, it just reflects that the amount of power that we're using each month.
Okay,
So
sorry. Yep.
sorry to confuse.
Thank you.
Yep,
No,
yep,
that's fine.
you're right. Yep. So, you know, the history of power. So this farm here was built in the year 2000, or we started building it in the year 2000. And in the year 2000, power prices tracked very, very closely to, standard, cost of living. So there was no disparity or difference between, the cost of a loaf of bread and the cost of power. Everything for a long time, it tracked very consistently. And then, so Australia once had relatively cheap power, and a lot of our older farms, especially those were built before 2010, reflected that in their hydraulic design. Was designed as much about minimising capex as what it was efficiency. So if you want to get water from A to B, you can do it in everything from a 450 mil pipe down to a 250 mil pipe. The 450 mil pipe might cost 3 times more, but will be 3 times more efficient to operate. And when power wasn't that big a deal, these farms will say, "Oh, we'll just go for the 300. You know, we can make do with burning a bit more energy, but we're going to save a heap of money on pipe." In 2010, this differential between the relative cost of power versus other goods started to just get all out of whack, and brings us to the point where we are now, where we've got this massive difference. So the cost of power, the real cost of power has gone up significantly, faster than inflation. So what that means is that we have to rethink everything we're doing around power usage and power efficiency. And on some of our farms, as I said before, it's 30% of the operating costs. So it's a big deal. So energy now means it means, but it also means more than just electricity bills. So CO2e, kilogram of production, is a key environmental KPI. So we take it very seriously, as do our customers. So what can we do about it? So when we think about the hydraulics, so the amount of water, thousands of litres a second that are pumped through abalone farms, small things in the hydraulic design make a big difference. So one of our go-to points has been to look at hydraulic. How do we improve the hydraulic efficiency? So pipes can be dug up and replaced. Pinch points in the system can be identified, and you can have one pinch point in the system that's requiring those pumps to be operating at 30% over their duty point. So what we did was we developed for our two most highest energy demand sites, we developed a complicated hydraulic model. So the hydraulic network is the circulatory system of the farm, with the pump station at the heart and the plumbing being the arteries. It runs 24/7, 365 days a year, and small efficiencies or inefficiencies can add up to significant costs. And then I touch on the energy equals flow multiplied by pump head. So we've developed hydraulic models, and the hydraulic models are customised to each site. So they include pump and pipe details for the whole farm. They require accurate elevation and water consumption data and operating regimes. And what they give us is that we can calculate the performance with results in terms of pressure, flow, energy consumption, and pumping operating points. So it unlocks the ability to predict the effects of small and large changes without actually doing them. And it's a holistic perspective, and it considers the network as a whole, because if you tinker with one part of the system, it has an impact on the other part of the system. So one of the things about an improvement in the hydraulics is because those pumps are running 24/7, you capture the benefit 24/7. So it was quite a revelation when we designed a new farm that we're proposing to build here in Portland at some time in the future, and we redesigned it. We had a solar system that was providing about 30% of the power, and we had to go back and make a whole lot of changes to the design. And one of the things was there were some residents that were upset by the solar system, so we removed the solar system, thinking, oh well, it's a pretty low head site anyway, we can live without the solar system. And then the EPA actually came back and said, we don't mind you making these changes, everything's fine, but we don't want you to get rid of the solar system because you were actually our flagship first business to where we've actually processed your application and taken climate change into account. So you need to do something to provide the same benefit that the solar was. So we went back to the engineers and we said, oh, what do we do here? So they said, well, we should look at the hydraulics, because we've sort of optimized the hydraulic design to keep CapEx manageable, and sort of there's been a couple of trade-offs in efficiency. So we went back to it, and we very quickly found a 30% improvement just through tinkering, making pipes bigger, basically. So it was a bit of a revelation about the power of interrogating the hydraulic system and making amendments and improvements in that area. So on our older farms, it has a very good IRR, and the bang for buck is really high because some of them are very poorly designed. So improving the hydraulic system is a major area that we're focused on. The next area is renewables. So bring on renewables. So solar, we've identified solar as being the most effective renewable system that we can deploy across our farms at this point in time. It's quick, it's known technology, and we can get about a 30% improvement reduction in our energy use. So it's the biggest bang for the buck when it comes to the biggest bang for buck definitely comes from our high energy sites. So those sites where power is making up 30% of their OPEX, it's an easy decision to make and a no-brainer to reduce that cost by 30%. Solar is good because peak generation coincides with peak use in summer. So we've actually started rolling out both ancillary solar systems at both the KI and Port Lincoln farms, and they'll be online by December 2025. So we'll be up and rolling by this summer. Other benefits of solar, we use it as a hedging tool. We will use it as a hedging tool to offset future retail price increases. It also helps because it's all behind the meter. So on places like Port Lincoln, for example, where our farm is out on Boston Point, if any of you have been there or you're familiar with that area, we have one power line that travels, it'd have to be 15 kilometres, and we're the last user. And when they put that power line in, they probably didn't anticipate that we'd be using as much power as what we do. So it's a system that's under stress. So we put the solar in, and we remove that potential risk and that stress that's in the power network supplying it. And we also see that in the future, when batteries become available, we'll have scope for power to be stored, because at peak generating periods, we produce more than what the sites can actually consume, and it's a bit of a balancing act to get that right. But if we had batteries, we'd be inclined to put more solar in, store the energy, and use it at night. And we'd probably get rid of our backup generators too, which would be handy. Another sort of left of field idea that we have is to improve yield. So CO2e per kg of usable protein reduces if you make more of the abalone usable. In abalone, the viscera and the blood, it's all edible. It's all edible protein. So in South Korea, for example, abalone viscera is a delicacy. One thing about the farmed abalone is we don't have any sand, and we in the abalone gut, and we can completely purge them. So, you know, it's edible protein, and it can be used as a delicacy, a gourmet delicacy. But we're also looking at medicinal uses. So abalone viscera can potentially be used to treat conditions like inflammatory bowel disease. So we're exploring those options. Another way, of course, is just to get better productivity from the amount of water that we pump. So if we can get more kilos out, and we're working on, I mean, it's every aquaculturalist is trying to grow their fish faster, as are we, through nutrition, genetics, better husbandry, etc. So if we can lift that level of productivity, kilos of abalone grown per kilo of water pumped, that helps too. There's also opportunities to look at shell and what uses are around for abalone shell. And finally, the application of RAS and water reuse. So abalone does have a high carbon emission, but it has a very low nutrient emission. So the water leaving the farm is very, very low in nutrients. So if we could reoxygenate that water, we could put it over the farm twice without any problems at all, which would make a massive improvement in our litres pumped per kilo of abalone out. So using things like oxygen's cheaper to pump than water, particularly on our high head sites. So that's something that we're looking at. So water reuse without actually having to invest into biofiltration. Sophisticated RAS with biofiltration certainly will have a place in our farms in the future. Maybe not the whole production cycle, but certainly parts of the production cycle. And again, that should, particularly on our high sites, should provide efficiencies in water use. And that's the end. I think I've got through in time. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Yeah, any questions for Tim? Just flick through.
Yeah, I have a question, Tim. It's Jo
Yeah.
Roscoe here from the Barramundi Farmers Association. Just in terms of, you said you spent a lot of effort in doing farm site audits, energy audits. Was that in-house, or did you secure expertise from externally to do that?
Do you want to
Yeah.
stop sharing screen, Tim?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
Stop sharing. Yeah, no, Joe, we used a consultant, and we actually used that consultant to put together a report for us, and that report was used to secure some funding as part of the it was a state initiative, and it was energy efficiency in agribusiness in Victoria.
Mhm.
And we invested that money into upgrading one of our pump stations.
Okay, great. Yeah,
So
we've found from some of our smaller members, family small operations, is getting an auditor on site is one of the most valuable things the association can actually do for them. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, it was and the audit report that we had done, it would have been 5 or 6 years ago, but I still use it today. We probably need to update it again. But of the list of options that she put forward, we picked off the top 3 and really focused on those.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Thank you. Robert, and then Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Julie, and thanks, Tim, for doing that presentation. It's really really fascinating to see what you've talked about there. A couple of things. I think with RAS, really interesting concept. How much work has been done in Australia with, let's just stick with abalone, in terms of being able to see how much you could reduce the need for fresh water all the time by using some supplementary reoxygenation of recycled water?
Not much. Not much is the answer. And I think RAS on its own, for that specific purpose, the cost of it, and just off the top of my head, my understanding, it probably doesn't stack up. But when it does stack up, Robert, when you say, okay, we've now got complete control of the water, so we can manipulate water temperature very easily. So that's going to contribute to better growth, better productivity. And the other area that probably has as much, maybe even more, of a positive impact on the financial business case for an abalone farm is if it helps you reduce the capex. So marine install, putting pipes into the ocean is a horrendously expensive exercise. So the type of pipes that we put into the water, I don't think anyone pumps more water. Well, the type of technology that we use, oil and gas use it. Diesel systems use it. Big pipes, we're talking 1 metre pipes that we're putting in the ocean, and quite a few of them. And probably wastewater sewage systems use them for discharging water. But you look at the likes of those industries, and you can pretty quickly appreciate that the dollars tick up. So if you could apply RAS to halve the water, and then you could halve the size of the hydraulic network, including marine installation, I think that's got huge potential to sort of transform the business dynamics of building new abalone farms in this country.
Excellent. And just one other question, if I may. You didn't mention too much about the outflow of water, so the return of the water from the farm to the sea. Is that also under pump, or is that more gravitational release?
It's all gravity release. So our farms that are probably in the optimal zone in terms of their pumping head, so that's probably between 3 and 6 meters nowadays, so 3 and 6 meters above sea level. The engineering that goes into making sure the water flows back to the ocean is as complicated or more complicated than the engineering required to get the water onto the farms. So there is the farms like this one here at Narrawong, the amount of energy in that drainage network probably isn't strong enough to bother trying to recapture that energy. In South Australia, where one of our farms were pumping, the highest point is 20 metres above sea level. It's something that could be considered. But I was actually in South Africa not last year, the year before. South Africa has a lot of pump ashore abalone farms, and some of those have very, very high pumping head, and they also have very expensive power and unreliable power. And there was one farm that was pumping to 45 metres, and they had a turbine on the downside part of the farm, but it was only recapturing about 25% of the energy. Yeah, so it was it kind of just didn't all hang together. They were doing other things like pumping into huge reservoirs that they were using as batteries. So pumping when the power's cheap, and rather than going onto generators when the power they had a lot of blackouts when we were there. They would just open up their reservoir when the power went off or when the power was expensive.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Matt.
Actually, Roger just answered that question. Do you see any value in that reservoir idea, Roger? Is there a mechanism to store energy, excess energy, when it's cheap and available? And is it worth? Is it something that you think Australian farmers will tend towards in the future if the area allows it?
Not our low head farms. I don't think would stack up there, but potentially with our higher pumping head farms. And if they've got space, there's a pretty significant capex bill and maintenance bill associated with maintaining those systems. But it certainly makes sense, and probably we'll wait and see how quickly batteries evolve, Matt. That might be, because effectively that's what they are. They're a battery.
And one other one, just quickly, what was the main opposition from the locals out of Portland for the solar array? Was it just a visual amenity, or is it the concept of renewables, or?
Just another reason for them to try and stop us, really. Yeah.
Right. So NIMBYs. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks very much for that, Tim. Just in the interest of time, we might wrap questions there if that's okay. And if you think of more, we can come back to Tim if that's okay. Ben, if you're ready, we might share screen and progress with your presentation if that's all right.
Yeah, well, good stuff, Tim. That was really good, mate.
He's good, isn't he?
Yeah, very, very good. So let me just share my screen here. Take it you can see that now. Or it's temp presentation mode.
Thanks.
And I'll fly through this as well. And again, I'm maybe even more interested in getting the if anyone's got a particular angle here or insight they want to fire away after questions. But this is more or less to complement what Tim's gone through and Ellen, but also just from some different perspective as well. So just quickly about Carbonhalo, we're working with some mega corporates across the economy, but we also do a lot of partnerships with industry associations to support members, such as the national tourism sector, the caravan sector. We're working with aquaculture, and the partnership model for small business engagement through the associations is proving really popular for this emission space. Incidentally, just talking about the Yumbah situation, because trying to get from Julie sort of the mix of audience here today, there's some smaller businesses, some larger businesses. Yumbah's a bit unique because they fit within this new mandatory reporting legislation, and they're in Group 3 at this stage. So, which means they've got to do some extra stuff beyond just, hey, we think this is good for reducing power or efficiency, right? So they've got some compliance to do. And we can talk a little bit about that complexity feeds into their program. But for a lot of businesses in the aquaculture industry, associations and partnerships, they're smaller businesses, right? They're unlegislated, all right? And so their sort of reason for getting engaged and involved with this tends to probably be more around the efficiency side than compliance, right? But the compliance is coming up. So where your business fits into this sequence on the call, I'm not quite sure, but they do create different drivers for getting involved in this emission space. So, and what we're seeing in the market right now is that, compliance, particularly in the corporate space, compliance is probably one of the key drivers of getting engaged now because of these new laws, right? But, and then the industries are also getting engaged with the accreditations now. I can provide some more detail in the session where emissions is now part of the industry accreditation models, right? The efficiency one's an interesting one, particularly with the corporates and small businesses. When we were thinking about emission measurement, it doesn't really pop into anyone's efficiency mindset normally off the bat, right? But it tends to come in there, right? And I'll just sort of talk about why, right? And I'm sure some of this will resonate. So, you know, why isn't every business looking at their energy efficiency and their emissions? Firstly, that for most businesses, this includes mega corporates, not just small businesses, mediums, they just lack the time, right? They lack the time to get to this task, whether it's for emission measurement or just energy efficiency in general. The knowledge is low. I heard that one of the questions was, you know, did you get an expert in to do this? You know, and we're seeing that more frequently. Getting data to work out what they can do is difficult. Preparing compliant reports is hard. You know, they don't really have independent service providers they can lean on. And it sort of creates this risk, you know, risk of either blowing a budget or not being compliant or reputation. So this is around emission reporting, but also provides barriers to getting involved in some of these efficiency projects as well. So, yeah, I know this webinar had a bit of a bent on electricities, and when we come to electricity and electricity emissions, we'll talk about the motivators here to get something done, but it's one of those areas you've actually got a lot more control on in terms of resolving your emission problems than other emissions. So, you know, the technology around solving your use of fuel or your supply chain is a lot more hard right now than solving your problems with power, right? So if you've got a motivation to solve your electricity emissions, whether that's because you want to adopt renewables because you've got a need to do that, and I'll talk about that in a minute, or you're trying to get more efficient, right? There are some pretty good programs around this now. And a lot of businesses in the economy can choose this year, if they want to be, to go for 100% renewable energy, if they wanted to. But it's this need thing, right? And again, Yumbah's a bit of a unique case because they've got a need because they have to start complying with reporting laws, but they've also got a need because they want to save some money, right? If you don't have it, if you're not driven by that need to save money, which most businesses are, right, but you've got those barriers, well, you're not driven by a need to be net zero or have a reduction target in place. What we tend to come across in working with lots of businesses is they just reduce their power and their emissions just by pure chance or luck, you know. Hey, we just started doing some things and our power came down, right? When they get involved in measuring their emissions, they all of a sudden discover that, hey, there's a heap of things we can do better and save money, but they had to get to the point of finding a need to go and measure their emissions in the first place, right? To go and discover that there's some better things they could be doing. So with your own situation, you know, working out what your need is here to do anything is more important than actually working out what those next steps are, you know. So Yumbah here, compliance and efficiency are both strong enough for them to actually go, stuff it, we're going to set up a project now and do this properly, right? I'll just talk about, Tim went through some of the statistics for his business. We're working with other aquaculture parts of the economy here. Here's an example of a prawn business that we worked with. Electricity in their case accounted for 53% of their total emission footprint, which means if they were interested in becoming more sustainable or reducing their emissions, that's primarily the number one thing they can focus on. You know, with the approach for this particular business in terms of getting a result, the first thing they have to do is decide whether it's the priority to fix it at all, right? And this business isn't subject to new mandatory climate reporting laws. So they've got to go, well, should we adopt renewable energy because it's good for our emissions reporting and footprint, or should we look at it because it's going to save us money, right? And both of those things require some energy and a focus to get off your sort of bum and go and do it, right? And I think that going to adopt renewable energy for, you know, is almost one of the easier paths they could take, but normally that costs capital or operating costs up front. Getting a power audit in to go and look at your path through efficiency and innovation is a fantastic approach. And I'll talk about at the end about some options you've got there, right? To then generate a business case to proceed. It sort of seems obvious as a sort of, hey, this is the way we could approach this. But unless you're going to actually put a physical project in place or a mindset that you're going to look at this, a lot of businesses really aren't doing a good job at this yet, you know. And we just tend to come across it through their emissions reporting to say, hey, you know, you could do a lot better now with your energy efficiency or your renewable adoption without a lot of additional work, right? You just need to focus on it. if we actually look at Yumbah, and I'm not going to blow these up so you can see them. Ellen mentioned, hey, we're trying to get our head around our footprint. Yumbah's business model is quite complex, right? So that little diagram down the bottom left, that is, we map out the supply chain of an organisation to work out their emissions boundaries. If you're looking at a business that's slightly larger, to go and work out where to focus your energy to reduce power or efficiency can be quite complex as well. So mapping that out is a useful exercise. And it so happens to be now that if you're going through an emissions assessment, it's a great way to actually map out your organisation, work out where the problem points are, to then start focusing your energy, right, to start pulling emissions out. So in the case of Yumbah, they had the need for compliance and efficiency. They've gone about defining their boundaries. They're now creating their baseline for their carbon footprint. That's going to enable them to prioritise their hotspots, right? Then they can look at getting in, like Tim mentioned, experts in to support reviews, whether it's renewable or new technology like pump systems or areas of innovation, because they've now got a really good idea where their problem actually is. They're not just guessing it because the maintenance manager told them, or they've just flicked and asked somebody the question. They've got real strong data now to back that up, right? You've then got to set a strategic approach to say, well, I've now got a problem. How am I going to approach it? And at that point, just setting up some targets, some objectives, and running it as a project tends to be the best way of going about it. Just a bit of a case study. So this was a reasonably large business, and they got an expert in. We got a partnership with an engineering firm to go and look at their operations to say, hey, we want to work out how to pull out cost and reduce emissions, because we've got a double driver, right? So we want to make sure our emissions is tracking the right way. They went through their electricity costs, their chilling loads, boiler usage, gas usage. They had a waste program, and they identified 9 projects. And those projects included solar, rooftop and ground mounted, some improved gas purchasing agreement, some better stuff for their chillers, right, and some better technology for their wastewater treatment plant, right? And that generated upwards of $4 to $7 million of identified savings per annum, right? And return on investment opportunities somewhere in the order of 3 to 50%, 33%, and the chance to pull their footprint down by up to 50%. Now, having been involved in running, large aquaculture operations, you'd like to think, hey, isn't this what my team should be focused on anyway, finding these things? Well, not normally, because they're so busy running the business and solving day-to-day problems, is getting someone in to give it a perspective on all the new technology and the ways to think about this can be quite a challenge. And I think now that the emission reporting landscape, whether you're being driven by compliance or, an industry accreditation model or a customer, it's going to give you new data and new incentive to go and start looking at this in a more detailed way. And you'll probably discover that there's quite a few ways to pull out significant cost and emissions just through the data you're going to get through those processes. So we're really Yumbah's done a fantastic job in pulling out their data to help with their footprint. And I'm not sure how many data points are up to, but it's a lot. But they're going to have a significant insight now with easy to understand modelling to go, hey, this is where we can focus our energy and start pulling out cost and emissions at the same time. Now, to sort of wrap this up, how we can help, and I think that we do a lot of work with businesses that are going, what, I don't understand this space. It's new to me, looks complicated, looks expensive. And we tend to send, these are big corporates down to sort of mum and dad businesses. Just meeting with somebody to understand your situation and how to navigate this, whether it's either efficiency or compliance or both, is a really great way to start. And also working out whether you're going to be directly or indirectly hit by these new legislative provisions. We do a lot of these every week with companies. Then if you were looking for experts to say, hey, could someone come into my organisation and go, what are my opportunities here? Opportunities to reduce fuel, heat use, the latest innovations in things that are going on out there, to come back to us with some direction on how to save money and reduce emissions. There are services that are available to do that now, quite a cost-effective services too. So you can come back with your sort of action plan. And I think Tim mentioned that, you got a power audit done, which is a great way. You can essentially now go for for power audits to look through power and other areas now to come up with some really good opportunities to improve your business. Then you can decide, hey, when can we get on with this, or how can we set these up to run as projects. Now, we haven't finished Yumbah's emission assessment yet, but that will happen probably over the course of the next sort of 3 to 4 weeks. I'll leave it open to Julie and Tim and Ellen and the team at the point that we want to come back and they're happy to disclose their emission dirty laundry to the group, and we can go through some of those areas. Then we can certainly do that as a follow-up session as well. That was it. This is a quick rundown. Happy to take questions about emission reporting opportunities out there. Yeah.
Oh, quick off the mark. Okay, let's shoot. Nick, across to you.
Pardon me. Thanks, Ben. And thanks, Tim, as well, for a really great presentation, mate. Really useful. There's been a bit of talk about, new tech, which is changing all the time, and it kind of raises that question: is when's the best moment to step in? Because stuff's changing so quickly. But the other thing that's changing quickly is policy around, especially thinking about the AEMO report that only came out, I think, late last week. Where they're talking about distribution, or concentrating on distribution networks more so than transmission because of the incredibly high cost of transmission. And I'm wondering if that's going to open up opportunities for abalone farms and similar operations who are generating electricity at the moment behind the meter to actually become sellers of electricity, if it's allowed to go back the other way in distribution networks.
That's pretty forward-thinking question you got there, Nick. I know that if I can try and relate this back to when we do a lot of work in growth of the prawn farm sector up in far north Queensland. That one of the first things that was done there, and it's going back a few years now, is that with the support of the government, they identified every piece of available land that could come up in the future where they could expand that industry based on all these parameters, access to water, irrigation, communities, all these things. It might be that both from the technology and then the farming expansion opportunities, because things have moved, if the abalone industry said, hey, we want to know how we can expand, or any other land-based sector said, hey, we want to know how we expand, doing those sectoral-based analyses now on these new criteria on where is the best place that these could occur now and what is the business model. It really probably needs an industry approach with the support of the government to go and do it, and getting a few experts around the table to go work those things out. I certainly, I'm happy, Tim, for you to jump in here. It's so hard now to keep across all the tech and all the opportunities and run a business at the same time. And so, I think an industry-based approach could be quite effective in looking at those things. And I do know that other industries are working together, businesses in those industries, to try and solve a common problem in that industry, going forward. So if power is one of the major problems for abalone, reducing it, maybe generating and selling it, probably needs more than just one business focus to try and work that out.
Ben, just a further comment. I was kind of thinking about the question from the point of view of, not only abalone farmers, but possibly farmers in general, because of the large areas of land that they have. And, it probably depends on where you are. If you, for example, Port Lincoln's at the end of the line, and at the end of the line, Port Lincoln's at the end of the line, and Tim's farm is at the end of the line, and so there's reliability problems. But, with a more distributed network, I imagine that there's a lot of opportunity for a whole town like Port Lincoln to generate its own power.
I am seeing, Nick, sort of related, is that there are farmers with a lot of land are now getting identified for more carbon sequestration opportunities than they are expanding of their farming operations. You know, so how can we use your land to grow trees or other things to help sequester carbon and make that into a new economic model for your business beyond your current farming operation, you know, to generate a new revenue stream and a more predictable revenue stream. I mean, there's one of those schemes even in Tasmania, you know, it's called Active Acres, and they'll start renting your land today to start putting regeneration on. You know, I know that I've heard that some of the mining companies are looking at being big, large landowners now than they are just mining minerals, because they've got access to land to do regeneration and generate new income streams. So I'm not sure if it's as simple now as saying, hey, we can generate power and create new farming, but it might be, hey, we've got lots of land, how do we diversify our farming to get new revenue streams as well?
Any other questions? Just conscious of time, so if people need to jump off, please do. But I had one. Obviously, Yumbah, you've got a number of species on the go, and there's an empire you're building looking at other species. As you're working through this methodology and you're bringing in, I guess, different species with vastly different business models, I guess what are the common things I think that you'll be rolling out, or energy saving thinking, or tech that you think will possibly be relevant for other parts of the aquaculture sector? We've got oysters online, but we've had people from all across the whole aquaculture industry subscribe to this series. So any tips? No?
Well, if I'm talking on behalf of Yumbah, one thing that the unique thing, and we've been across it, is how diverse it is.
Yeah.
And I did say to Evan, hey, why can't, when you research the carbon footprint associated with various forms of aquaculture, they talk about oysters and mussels as being almost net positive because of the sequestration. So I said to Ellen, why can't we just palm all of our abalone CO2 back off into oysters, and
just make them cancel each other out?
But the other thing is, I said, well, abalone build a shell, a third of the animal is shell, it's calcium carbonate. But and then I put the same question to Ben, and I don't think we've actually solved that sequestration puzzle yet, and it's probably because they don't know where the shell goes. But it is something that would be interesting to explore, because we might be sitting on a great sequestration story or reality without actually exploring the opportunities around it.
And yeah, Andy Myers is on. Oh, sorry, Ellen.
So I was going to say, I think that then brings you into a really interesting space around like your marine bioproducts and how we handle with our waste, and then that sort of all ties back into what Tim's saying there. Yeah. And one of the other things is that we've identified through this process, while we had this high focus on abalone being, a high energy user, there are still a lot of areas with the other species where we've identified that there is overlap, like when you're looking at your refridge and your freight, and when we've mapped out the supply chains, looking at where all of our species actually have these other areas, this process has just really highlighted that, don't get blinded by the abalone's water usage, because there's probably still these other areas that we can look at, and I think they would definitely be applicable across other species across the industry as well.
Robert, thank you, Ellen. Before we jump to you, Robert, Andy, is there anything you'd like to add just from your knowledge around what we chatted about last week?
Yeah, sure. We're kind of neck deep into this whole conversation about whether carbon that's stored in shell is seen as an offset or not. We've looked at a whole heap of different papers on this, and the scientific community is very much split. But from our understanding, the carbon that is put down into that calcium carbonate shell actually comes from the bicarbonate ions in the ocean, and the majority of those bicarbonate ions are formed through the weathering of rocks over, tens of thousands of years. So the actual sequestering of carbon in the shell does nothing in terms of the, a CO2 atmospheric compensation. but there are two different schools of thought on that, so there is no consensus whether you can actually claim that as a CO2 sequestration into shell.
Andy's crunching some numbers on that one for oysters. Robert.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
You go, Tim.
Thanks.
Oh, I was going to say, you know, enough carbon's going into the ocean from the atmosphere to make it more acidic. You would think there'd be enough going in there to, you know, to help build our shells. But anyway.
There's also a release of carbon dioxide in the calcification process as well, which increases the partial pressure of CO2 in the ocean. It's the carbonate chemistry of it all is baffling. So
he put up this slide with the chemistry, like, you know, the algorithm, and I was like, oh, that okay, sure. Robert, across to you.
Okay, thanks, Julie. Ben, just a question. We've got a few industry sector associations on here, so they're representing a number of different producers and farms. With Carbonhalo and the way the business works, is there much advantage to your business and therefore to their business by saying that if you got like all of the abalone farmers together, for instance, or all the prawn farmers together as an association, and because they're similar in the way they have their boundaries set up and things like that, that is a way of being able to, I guess, get better bang for your buck when you go in there and say, okay, here we can map out the general industry and then specifically go in deeper and deeper as needs go, depending upon their size. Is that something that you've found working with different industries in your business?
Yes, good question, Robert. Like, I'll give two perspectives on this, right? Is that corporates have got to do stuff because they've got laws and ESG pressure now, right? When it comes to small businesses, whether they're part of an association, right, or not, is what's their motive to do anything in the emission reporting space, right? And I tend to start there. And what we've seen is that, yeah, there's been some pressures mounting because of customer needs or industry wants to create a good story, right? But those drivers aren't necessarily strong enough to get them out of bed to go and do something, you know, about it. And to me, it's not so much being... we've got programs that are offered in other industry sectors completely free, right? No charge. They're simple. You can sign up. You can get your stuff done in an hour. Still doesn't mean anyone's going to use it, right? You've got to come up with what is the key driver to get their participation, right? And we've got a lot of experience in this space now. And what we've seen is the largest driver for SME participation is an industry accreditation model. Right. So if we take the tourism sector, for example, and they're probably the most progressive for small businesses, sustainability in the economy, because they've had sustainability for their small business stuff for many years. Right. They're now looking at making emissions a part of their accreditation model. Right. One is because they don't believe they're going to be remaining internationally competitive if they don't. Right. Now, that means it's just a part of being a sustainable accredited business as opposed to some bolt-on or add-on or extra program you've got to do. Right. Now, that'll drive mass participation, right? It'll still cost the business nothing. It costs them nothing now through the models that we run, right? So if you're going, hey, if it's barramundi or if it's prawns or it's oysters, whatever the species, what is the motivator for our members to get involved in this space, right? And if that's an industry story, because we think we can be a better, more competitive industry or have a better proposition to the customer base, right? I'd consider working out how you might come up with an industry accreditation model, as opposed to each business just hanging out on their own doing something about it. You know, I could certainly say now, even if we had to go into each one of let's take one of the sectors and say, hey, we've got to go into each business and do their footprint now. So some of our models are completely free and low cost anyway, right? And even from a benchmarking point of view, they all tend to be a little bit different. But the way that they measure the emissions is sort of the same. So you can come up with some generalizations if you want to, but the processes aren't that tough anymore to say generalization is going to solve a huge amount of load, you know? So we're working with some sectors now because we've had such experience to say, unless you've got that motivator in place, there's no point us even coming and running webinars and processes and that, because we know your participation is going to be poor, you know. So I'd sort of more look at it in that way and go, hey, let's see if we can, if there's a big enough driver, you know. And again, Yumbah is a unique case of this webinar, because whether Tim wanted to do it or not, the law's going to force them anyway, right? They're just going about it with a really good attitude and going, hey, we can actually strip a lot of cost out at the same time, you know. So I think that's the perspective there, you know. Yeah. And like a lot of the bodies too are now going, we like the model where the members can log in through our current portal, so there's no disruption, right? That we'll mark it out that this is a provider. You don't have to do that. That's our, and can you guys just look after it for us, please? Because we don't want our members to go and have to search and find a provider and that sort of stuff. So they'll essentially fund those models, or we'll just have a little commercial relationship in the middle to make those things productive, you know. So I'm quite happy with any association to sit down with the leaders or the board or whatever and just say, hey, here's our experience in dealing with multiple associations in this space, what works, what doesn't work, and even understand their strategic priorities of what they're trying to get done, maybe give them some pointers on how they might want to think about it. Yep.
Thanks, Ben. Real good, very insightful. That's great.
Thanks, Ben. Nick.
Well, just to follow on from that, Ben, if Argo, as in the Growers Association, wanted to get the rest of the farms to do effectively what Tim's done, that seems like a very straightforward process. And it seems like something that Joe's already doing with Barra.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll give you two examples. With Yumbah, we're doing that as a one-off engagement to help them comply with the law, but also give them deep analytics, right? If you look at, say, the Prawn Farmers Association, who we're working with, we've got a bit of arrangement there where their members can come in now this year and get their emissions assessment done for free, right? As an association approach, we've got that same arrangement in place for, say, the wine industry in Tasmania. We've got the same thing nationally for the tourism sector. You know, so we've got multiple examples of where that model's in place. The key for me is not so much, hey, we've got a structure to make it easy for your members. It's you've got an incentive framework or a reason why for your members. That's much more important, you know. And if that's not strong enough, we'll tell you not to waste your time or anyone else's time on it, you know. Just wait till you're ready, or wait till you've got these extra few things in place, right, so that you know this will be a really well done, well executed program, you know. Well, I can tell you now, for a completely free, easy to use program, we've done national webinars, national seminars, spoken to thousands of businesses. Doesn't mean a single one is going to get off there, bum and use it, you know. So yeah, but then I've seen a case where the motivators are right and bang, in they come pretty quick.
Yeah.
You know? Yep.
Yeah. We can have a chat about this offline, Nick, and see if there's any way we can help. So, all right. Any further questions? Otherwise, we might wrap because we are running a bit over time, everyone. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Tim, Ellen, Ben, you have been fantastic. That was so fascinating and really great to start getting into some of the data and seeing what you guys are delving into in the nitty-gritty. It's really interesting to sort of start seeing where this is all heading and what you guys are sort of flushing out when you're starting to delve into what's happening within the businesses. So really appreciate it. And looking at, you know, the questions that were coming through, I think everyone was quite interested and fascinated. So appreciate you guys taking the time to share that with us. So thank you very much again. No, that's right. It was an absolute pleasure.
Right. Thanks, Ben. Really good stuff, Ellen.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, take care, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the week.